Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, contributor on Five Reasons Sports Network, also co-host of the Scouting Combine with Hassan Patel. And today we're going to be reviewing my grades for Week 10 for the Miami Dolphins offensive line against the Rams. This wasn't the best performance by the offensive line, but it's also probably not as bad as some may think. They were down Austin Jackson to start the game, and they also lost Rob Jones at halftime. So, we've talked a lot on here about continuity and how key that is to the success of the offensive line. So this was definitely a game where that was tested. My grades reward consistency. They don't give out extra credit for great plays, and they don't dish out extra punishment for bad plays. For those that criticize my grading method, this is a good game to use for that. Miami had some very visible bad plays in this game, and we're going to look at some of those. On the other side, and part of it was the game plan, they didn't have a lot of highlight type plays for the offensive line. So when you look at other grading systems, and I'm going to use PFF as an example, where they do give extra credit or extra punishment for those, great or awful plays, I would expect that, this week's grades are going to be on the low end for those, grading systems. Overall, the season average has been 8.35, and yesterday's grade came out at a 8.49. You can see that's just above the season average. The people that say that the game plan that the Dolphins use is designed to protect the offensive line, this is a game where I'll agree with that. The breakdown of the play calling was significantly different than in previous weeks, and you can probably attribute that to the loss of Austin Jackson and also what seemed to be a late scratch from Alec Ingold. So the playbook was reduced, especially in the run game. The result of that was, for this week, the grade that's generated based on a per play performance was likely better than what it would have been had they used the same game plan as they did in previous weeks. All right, so here's everybody that we had graded for the game. You can see that Kendall Lamb is in for Austin Jackson. Don't have Patrick Paul up here because he didn't play enough snaps for me really to give a fair grade to him. At left guard, you had Rob Jones and Lester Cotton basically splitting the game in half. In parentheses for each of the players, you're going to see their average grades so far this year. And our lowest graded player from the Rams game was Kendall Lamb, and he came in at a 8.03. I thought that he did just okay filling in for Austin Jackson. There was definitely some juice missing in the run game. I had a total of 2 plays that I just gave him a 0, and then a few others that were half credit. But when you look at the type of plays that those occurred on, there were several that were outside zone runs to the right, and that's really somewhere that Austin Jackson has made an impact in the game this year. They didn't try to do it a lot. Like I said, they protected the offensive line to an extent with the play calling. So that's why our worst performance in this game was Kendall Lamb still coming in at an 8.03. All right, here we're going to have what was probably Lamb's worst play of the game, and this is going to be a outside zone to the right. And as you can see, they're looking to get the ball outside right away on this, and Lamb's trying to reach verse and does a good job of getting into position, but he's just not able to, react diverse, getting a little further inside than what he thinks here. And the result of that is that Jalen Wright is not able to continue to the outside, has to cut back inside, ends up getting tackled for a negative 1 yard gain. But this was the worst play by Kendall Lamb on the night. But this was kind of an indicator of the way that outside zone to the right went for a lot of the night. There was definitely a lot missing with Austin Jackson not in the lineup. All right, our next lowest graded player is Rob Jones. And this grade may seem a little high based on what you recall from watching the game last night. Obviously it's only a half worth of grading, but I actually, in my grades, he came out better in this game than he did in last week's game. He's still, below the season average of what the offensive line is doing and was, a little further below the grade that I had for the offensive line for last night. But I don't feel like this was a awful performance overall from Rob Jones. I feel like it was, one of those situations where he had one or two plays that really stood out, and that's what you remember from the game. So this here is going to be his worst play of the game, and this is going to be a pass pro rep. You can see his hands get outside, and then he's not able to stick onto that block, right? He starts outside, can't reset his hands inside, gets the inside swim move, and ends up at what should be a sack, right? And I think that most people acknowledge that, this should not have been a sack, right? This was definitely a zero graded play from Rob Jones, but when you look at how it should have impacted the play overall, this was a pretty costly play at the time that I believe flipped this from, what could have been field goal range into a punt. But, this was a visibly bad play by Rob Jones. I think that this one, probably sticks out in the minds of a lot of fans. But, this is also a play that even though there was a failure on the offensive line, there was also some other factors that led to this play being much worse than what it should have. All right, back to our grades. And our next lowest grade that came in similar to Rob Jones is going to be Liam IKenberg. And IKenberg is obviously an interesting one for this entire fan base because he has a knack for performing well except for a few really bad plays. So when you look at, like the Kendall Lamb or the Rob Jones type players, they'll have, a few plays throughout the game where they're getting half credit and maybe, one bad play that really sticks out. And IKenberg, on the other hand, is a player who, will avoid those half-point grades, but tends to have one or two really bad grades a game. And that's what we saw in this one. I had 3 zero-graded plays for him, which was probably the most of anyone in this game. But he just has a knack for, when he loses really bad. So as we flip over to the film for Eichenberg, this was probably the most visibly bad play for him in the game as well. And, there's no hiding from this. This was not a good rep by any means. It's not the easiest block getting out here on a 3-tech. And obviously you can see that Patrick Paul was in at this point. This is our, outside zone to the right, trying to get Durham Smythe through there leading. But as you can see, Eichenberg does not, you kind of have two options here. And one is to get around that defensive tackle and seal him to the inside to allow Wright to continue his path to the outside. Or, it's also acceptable to, not be able to get that outside leverage, but to create some vertical push that would allow Jalen Wright to bend it back inside, as you can see that he's trying to do there at the end. But the end result here is that Liam doesn't do either of those and just, like I said, no other way to describe it, gets his ass kicked on this play. Um, and unfortunately, we're used to seeing some plays like this from Liam. And, I don't know if that will ever stop, but what I do like to try to continue to reiterate is that, one play like this in the game, right, or in this case, 2 or 3 for him, should not overshadow his performance for the rest of the game. All right. Our next lowest graded player is going to be a little bit of a surprise with Tron Armstead coming in here at a 8.41. Definitely not his best performance this year. I had 2 plays that I had him graded as a 0. One of those plays would be the third down pass from Tua, where Tron Armstead got beat inside pretty early to a scramble to his left and was able to complete a very nice pass to Odell Beckham Jr. to continue the final drive of the game. And then this was the other play that I had for Tron, which was also on that drive, but later in the game. So this is going to be a duo to the left. And as you can see here, he's trying to get that inside position and to seal that defender outside. And that defender does a good job of, forklifting Armstead off of his body and being able to shed and make that block. This is definitely one of those places that we probably missed Austin Jackson this week. Jackson has made a living on being able to, block down on these type of plays and just clear out a big lane. Armstead has shown good ability to do this. He's usually a little better as a secondary player on the block than he is as the primary player as he is here. But, like I said, 2 really bad reps from Armstead in this game, both of them on the last drive. Not his greatest performance, but also, great players are allowed to have average performances, and that's what we got from Armstead this week. All right, so our last 2 players this week, our highest graded players, I don't have videos for them. Like I said, this game was one where you had some really bad plays, and we just went over some of those, but you didn't have a lot of highlight type plays for the offensive line. So, we're going to go through some additional film after the grades here, but in terms of just individual performances and individual blocks that I would go out there and highlight, there wasn't a lot of that in this game. So our next player is going to be Lester Cotton. He came in at an 8.87, so I had him graded on 23 snaps. He didn't have any 0 graded plays. He had 2 half graded plays. So, on the surface, you'd say this is a great performance from Lester Cotton, but I also think that once he was in the lineup, that Mike McDaniel did even more to protect him, in addition to Kendall Lamb in terms of play calling. He really wasn't asked to do a lot, but, what he was asked to do, he did well in this game. And then our other player is Aaron Brewer, and, this is just consistently, what we've come to expect from him. You can see that his 9.29 grade is the highest of this week, and it's even higher than his season average, which is also the highest of this group. Early in the season, you'd sit there and you'd say that Tron Armstead and Aaron Brewer are the best players on this offensive line. It's become clear through this season that Aaron Brewer is the best player on this offensive line, and this has been a great signing for Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel in this offense. Perfect fit, nothing bad to say about him. He also had 2 partial graded plays, didn't have any 0s, but he also played, twice as many snaps as Lester Cotton did. So that's why his grade, even though they had the same number of partially bad snaps, Brewer had more overall snaps, and that's why his grade is, decently higher than what Lester Cotton's is. All right, so one of the things that I've, continued to try to demonstrate in these videos is that you can have plays where, the 5 offensive linemen that we're talking about, that we're grading in these videos, can all do their jobs, but a play can still fail for other reasons. And sometimes that's not always available in the broadcast. So since there wasn't individual performances that I felt were really worth highlighting in this game, I feel like it'd be a good time to take a look at some of those plays. And this isn't necessarily calling out players that are not offensive linemen for failed plays. This is more so just trying to show that even though run plays may have failed or pass plays may not have gone as well as you'd like, it's not always just because of the offensive line. So here's one example of that, and this is going to be a crack toss that was run fairly early in the game, and this is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. here is the one that they're trying to have crack this defender. So you can, obviously see here, this is poor leverage to begin with for this play. Would have really liked to see them check out of it into something else, but they continue with it anyways. You're going to have Achane coming in motion here for the ball snapped, and he's going back out. And you can see from the start that, Beckham doesn't have good leverage on that defender. He's not able to get into position to get good leverage. And Achane from the very beginning is looking to get outside. This is a play that, is designed to get around that crack block right away. And obviously watching this in slow motion the day after, we can say that, Achane could have cut this up inside here. And you're right, he could have. Certainly would have preferred that versus him trying to stop and change directions there. But in terms of the way that this play is supposed to be blocked, right, you've got Liam IKenberg, even though he's not blocking that defender, right, not going to tell you this is a great block, he's not letting him cross his face, which is the biggest thing on this play. And same thing across the line. Kendall Lamb, I was surprised they ran it with him out here because he's not the same athlete that Austin Jackson is, and they really haven't run a lot of crack toss this year. But Kendall Lamb's doing an okay job of getting out here in space. Had Beckham been able to seal that defender inside, really had something nice developing to the outside there. Lamb instead does a good job of helping Beckham, and Achane's just not able to see that and utilize it. But like I said, outside of IKenberg, who, again, not a great block, but he's doing what he needs to on this play. This is an example of a play that was blocked fairly well by the 5 offensive linemen, but failed for other reasons. All right, so this one is going to be an inside zone to the left. And as you can see here, if we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those guys are doing a pretty good job getting onto their blocks and creating some solid movement. But where this play is failing is that it looks like, based on his first steps, right, and I know that we all like to rag on Julian Hill, but he's taking an outside step right away. Looks like he's expecting some inside help from Malik Washington, who they've used more often in the run game, the last week or so. And to me, it just looks like in this case that Malik Washington just gets a little too far outside. You'd like to see him, if he is supposed to help to the inside there, stay a little closer to Armstead and Jones as he's coming down the line there. And, just able to help kick that block out, as opposed to getting out here to the outside where he's not able to do much to help that block. But again, you can see, some solid blocks on the inside there, but Jared Verse, who had a great game last night, is able to defeat the combination block of Julian Hill and Malik Washington and make that play. But another example of, especially an inside run play that looks like it should succeed if you're looking at the 5 offensive linemen, but, did not succeed for other reasons. All right, we're going to get another inside zone here, and this one's going to be to the right. And once again, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Got some solo blocks there, getting a good combination block between Cotton and Aaron Brewer, right? Not a huge lane to run through, but enough to, if HN can get in there and just drive his legs a little bit, you're going to end up with a 5-yard gain when this ends. But unlike the last play, I can't find any reason not to blame this on Julian Hill. You can see that, he just needs to get inside and work through that inside shoulder of the defender, because the only thing that can't happen here is for this defender to cross his face and make it back into the play. And that's exactly what happens on this rep. Hill, as usual, had some highlight type blocks in this game, but also, had some where you need to see improvement. And this is definitely one where you need to see improvement. But back to the topic of showing this, just another example of, you've got some solid blocking from the 5 guys that were grading in this videos, but, you have a failure by somebody that's outside of those grades that's, causing a failed run where, when you're watching on a broadcast, you might say, hey, the offensive line needs to block better. But, that's just not the case. The offensive line was doing fine in several of those instances, and it was another reason that the play was failing. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Like I said, not the greatest week for the offensive line. If there was a way to add context to the grades that said that the line was protected, then this grade probably wouldn't have come in a little above what the season average has been. But that's just not the way this particular grading system works. I'm going to grade the players based on what they were asked to do and based on what they were asked to do against the Rams. Outside of some, really bad plays that we, highlighted some of those in this video, I felt like the line did what they were asked to do at a, pretty adequate level. You can disagree with that. Feel free to leave a comment below and let me know what your thoughts were on the offensive line this week, and we'll talk again next week.